What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode one. It's finally episode one. We're getting off the ground. So, where do we start today? What do we want to talk about? And the podcast is about bikes and beers and how they relate together. Today's story is a lot about that relationship, at least for me personally. It is going to be more beer focused, and we'll talk about some history and some beer with some bicycle tie-ins. Going forward, we may have more bikes and less beer. There might be stuff in between. I do want to talk about rides of the spring, rides of the summer, rides of charity, rides of gravel. But today is really going to be beer focused. The reason for that is I had recently been to the 35th anniversary of the Cambridge Brewing Company in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Got to see a lot of old friends, brewing colleagues, and it was a really, really good time. Amazing spread and beer and everything else that you would imagine for a place that's been around for 35 years. So let's talk about some beer history. During that day, I received some news. Some things I've heard about for a while, heard the rumors, but out of respect for those people that I know, I never really wanted to go public, so to say, until they actually made this news public, and now I feel as if I can go ahead. I also thought at this point I'd have a few episodes under my belt. Episode 1, Episode 2, Episode 3, and this would have been Episode X, because I was going to jam it into the middle someplace, because I may have had a series of episodes already. But I hadn't gotten off the ground yet, and it just so happens it's time to be able to do that. Those of you who are watching on video, you may see me looking around a little bit. That's because I had to write down some notes, because I really wanted to gather my thoughts. So this doesn't make the greatest video interpretation of this. However, it is supposed to be just a podcast, so that's audio. So those of you listening can't see all my little quirks that's happening right now. All that said, I did want to make sure that I had my focus and my thoughts, because this is kind of an important subject, or at least for this particular brewery. Let me step back a little bit. One of the ideas that I had that I wanted to do is do a bike ride at a brewery. Seems pretty simple. Then I said, let's bring it up a notch. Let's ride from and to the oldest brewery in each state here in New England. So those who haven't heard or don't know, I reside in New Hampshire, one of the 6 states in New England in the United States. I don't know if you're listening across the pond. I have no idea. But I am in New Hampshire, and I said, let's do a bike ride at each of the breweries, 6 breweries, with a ride, and we'd end up there. The oldest brewery in New Hampshire, in my home state, operating continuously. And we're not talking Anheuser-Busch. Yes, Anheuser-Busch is in Merrimack, and they were opened in 1970. But I'm talking about brew pubs and craft brew and part of that revolution. That brewery is no longer. About a year ago, they had a water pipe burst and the massive amount of flooding. This was a 2-inch water main that burst in an apartment above the brew pub. And the amount of flooding that happened by the time that the fire department was able to get there, which was very, very quickly. It's not like they took their time, but we're at a 2-inch water line. Let's go a lot of water very, very quickly. The amount of damage, very, very extensive. I received that news from my friend Greg Ouellette, who is the head brewer at Martha's Exchange. Martha's Exchange at the time is the 2nd oldest brewery in the state of New Hampshire. By him telling me this news about this particular brew pub, which was the oldest operating brewery, now Martha's is the oldest. So it pains me to say that the Portsmouth Brewery is closing its doors. They've been closed since June of last year, but they're not going to open. And Peter Eggleston, who is their owner and founder of the Portsmouth Brewery, he made the announcement to the New Hampshire Brewers Association that they're calling it quits. And at that, there's a lot of ties for beer in that community, in this community, I should say. And the beer, and for me, there's a biking tie to it as well. So, to pay homage to the Portsmouth Brewery, I dug out of my collection a bottle of their Imperial Stout. This is Impy Stout. The Portsmouth Brewery, aged on vanilla bean and port-infused oak, and this was bottled February of 2023. Not soon thereafter, the water pipe burst, 2023, and here we are in 2024, and they're still closed, and they're calling it quits. So I am going to keep with the theme of the podcast and talk about beer and this beer and how it tastes and the notes and a little bit of history of not only Imperial Stout, but I really want to focus on P Brew. So we're going to talk about their history and how it ties into my beer community. Wax top on this bottle. Those who are not watching, it's got a cool little raven on it here, and a maroon wax top. Perfect beer for you to pour into a snifter. Big beers like this, Imperial Stouts, are usually higher in alcohol percentage, which means they can be laid down for a little while. They will age very, very nicely, and the complexity will change on Imperial Stouts. A lot of stronger beers will. Imperial Stouts, Baltic Porter, barley wine, they're all kind of in that realm of being able to age and develop different flavors, different nuances. One of the things I always used to tell people about dark beer, and they're like, now they're thinking, oh my God, it's too strong. There's a while that there was a perception that dark beer was stronger. And I would just tell them, let's compare Coca-Cola and Mountain Dew. We know which one's darker, but which one's stronger? Mountain Dew is the stronger of the beer, with more calories, more sugar, more caffeine than Coca-Cola. So don't be afraid of the dark. This, however, is a dark beer to be the dark beer. A Russian Imperial Stout. Wonderful notes of baker's chocolate. The taste. I've actually had this bottle sit out a little bit, let it warm up, let some of these flavors come through, and these aromas. Ooh, very oaky. Not very oaky, but the oak is definitely there. There's an oak presence to this beer, which adds to it. So you're getting chocolate. I'm getting roasted coffee, dark coffee, baker's chocolate. So not just chocolate, not sweet chocolate, but like that dry, almost bitter type chocolate to go along with it. Your aromas. And by the way, if you're listening and you're like, hey, episode 1, you need to clean up your audio, I'm doing this live. I am speaking from the heart. I'm recording this on video, which won't be all podcasts, but I have a lot of just emotion here, and I don't care about the ums and ahs today. I simply don't. And so if that bothers you that much, come back in a little while. But you've got to understand that beer is personal, and editing it so it sounds wonderful, that's not what this day is about. So I have this glass of this wonderful Imperial Stout. Again, vanilla bean, port infused oak barrel. As it warms, you can get some of that red wine character as well in the aroma. The alcohol percentage on this beer is 9.6%. A lot of Imperial Stouts will go bigger too. They could go up to 12. 8.5 to 12 would be your range. You want a bigger starting gravity. You also want to have a lot of hops to bitter it. Another interesting point, as we do a little bit of beer education here, everybody thinks about hoppy beers, your IPAs. But I want you to take your left hand and your right hand, and I want your left hand to be malt and your right hand to be hops. And if you have them next to each other, this is a balanced beer. And if you bring your left hand up and that's all your malt, that's bringing up your malt and your sweetness and your body. But if it's too sweet, that beer is unbalanced. So now what you can do is add more hops. So now you can bring up your other hand more hops. So you can have a big beer that's got, 90 IBUs, but it's not going to taste hoppy because you've got enough malt to balance it. And because they're higher, bigger, you get a bigger beer. You get a more robust beer. You get a higher alcohol beer. And that's how you make a well-balanced big beer. And that's what the Portsmouth Brewery has done for years as they've been doing this. Now, I did say this should be in a snifter glass, and it is. However, I have myself here a little Portsmouth Brewery tasting glass. I'm pretty sure I have two. So whenever I wanted to share a big beer like this, I could pour half in each one, and we each have some. So I need to look around and find my other glass because, well, this is going to be a collector's item. Let's talk about the history of the Portsmouth Brewery, shall we? Yes, we shall. I'm hoping I don't spill this everywhere. And I didn't. Ooh, look at that head. Nice dark head on this beer, too. So if you think of other stouts or other beers that you may have seen, it has that big white fluffy head. This is dark. A cocoa tan head and a wonderfully dark beer, which this glass is not beer clean for those who are looking, and we will do an episode about beer clean glasses. We are going to do a lot of beer education. The reason I started this podcast is because people will do beer reviews, but they don't really talk about the history and they don't really give any education to it, and I feel like that part is missing. I'm not going to go deep into education. There are other podcasts that do a wonderful job at that and get very in-depth. I don't want to go that deep, mostly because maybe you're just enjoying a beer and because you want to have a beer after a long bike ride, which is what I like to do, and it's ride bikes, drink beer. I mean, that is the hashtag. That is kind of the mantra. It is what I do. So, a little bit of information without getting too geeky and nerdy. So, the Portsmouth Brewery was opened in 1991. They've been in the game a long time. Peter and his sister, Janet, at the time, were running a place in Massachusetts, the Northampton Pub and Brewery, which is still around, by the way, and wanted to expand out and find some other places during the craft beer boom. Brew pubs weren't really a thing. There were other small microbreweries, but not so much the brew pub. And they had the brew pub model, and we were figuring it out as they went along and came to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and opened the Portsmouth Brewery. Quick little story about that, too, and this is something that I read, and I've heard this story actually told multiple times, that while they were opening, a sales rep from a larger mega brewery came in and said, "So, when are you going to be open and placing your orders?" And Peter was like, "Well, we're not. We're just going to serve the beer we make." And the guy kind of laughed and said, "Oh, really? Good luck. You'll never stay open." They've been open since 1991. So that guy was wrong, and it's also an enlightenment to beer and craft beer. And there isn't really this battle that everybody thinks about big beer and craft beer and small beer. There are big corporate guys. There are salespeople. They're the ones that don't get it. The brewers, they get it. I've been to Anheuser-Busch in Merrimack, New Hampshire, and been treated with so much respect. And they drink our beer, and we drink their beer, and we talk, and we have questions answered, and it's an amazing experience. AB is a great place, and they make very consistent beer for that style. This is what we're going to do. I'm going to do it every single time. The business side of it is what becomes the monster that no one really wants to be a part of. But the people, always good. That guy was the person that was part of the monster. Thankfully, Peter kept his head and said, "No, we're just going to make our beer." And they've been going ever since. Creating beers, they had a slogan we serve all types. Let's think about what that means in today's day and age. All types. All types of beer, all types of people, all types of backgrounds. They don't care. Beer was a welcoming spot. And the Portsmouth Brewery was that place to be able to go in. Brewers, if they were in the area vacationing or whatever, they would stop in. I used to do that. I'd be up at Lake Winnipesaukee. I believe at the time I was brewing in Newport, Rhode Island. I'm up at Lake Winnie, vacation time, and I would take the long way around so I could stop into Portsmouth and have beer and get lunch. Their mussels, were to die for. Oh, the curry mussels, they were so delicious. I just thought about that. No more those mussels. I was hoping they'd come back. But so the Portsmouth Brewery is as great as they were anyway already and established. And they've had brewers come in and out. They were also part of beer lore, so to speak, when Todd Mott was their brewer. Todd Mott made a beer called Kate the Great. And if you're familiar with beer and beer chasers, the ones who want the white whale, the ones you got to get, I have to have this beer. At a time, a place called Beer Advocate, which was a magazine and a website at the time, named it one of the best beers on the planet. And everyone was like, I must go have this beer. This was in 2012. The beer was on before that. I remember Todd saying, hey, we would go have the beer, and it was on. And you could go in the next week, and the beer was on. And you go in the week after that, and, well, the beer was on. And when Beer Advocate declared it one of the best beers on the planet, everyone came up to get it. And they had to come up and have this beer, and there were lines. And they're like, whoa, what do we do with this? Well, let's create an event around it. And that was one of the other things the Portsmouth Brewery did. They brought tourism to the area. So it's not just a beer, it's not just a bar, it's not just a pub, it's not just a brewery. It created culture where beer geeks from all over the place would come to New Hampshire, get hotel rooms, stay for the weekend, eat at the restaurants, drink at the local places. It influenced the economy. What Peter did at that time, I don't think had been done in the past, to be honest. Peter gave back as well. Not only was he the first president of the New Hampshire Brewers Association, but their brewery would also do charity giveaways, could give back, I should say. They had these wooden nickels. So if you bought a pint on there were certain days, you always got a wooden nickel or a quarter. We'll call it a wooden nickel. And you could take them and put them into a charity box, a little box, and choose what charity you wanted to go towards. And at the end of the month or the quarter, whatever it was, they would tally it all up and be like, okay, here's how much money we're donating to charities. It was very giving. So not only did they bring all that to the area and create one of the best beers that people had had, and then even after Todd had moved on in 2012, I might be messing that up. But after Todd had decided to step down, another brewer took over him, Tyler Jones. Tyler Jones now runs Black Hog in Connecticut. There have been a succession of brewers who have come after that. And not just brewers, you can be a brewer and just move along, but they were key brewers. One of the brewers that he hired, who had, was Maxine. Maxine was a bartender at the time, and she became an assistant, and then she became a brewer. One of the first, female, there were other female brewers, but she was a prominent female brewer. There weren't a lot at the time. Now there's a lot, which is great. And they're still fighting for their space. But in the beginning, or at least in the time of my world, I never thought of Maxine as a female brewer. She was a brewer. She was an equal. She made good beer. She came up with the recipes. She had to be able to handle the management of the brewery side of things, ordering materials, taxes, all that stuff that goes along with it. So having a female brewer on staff, and I don't think they looked at her as like, oh, we got to have her because she's a female brewer and that'll help us. No, they hired talent. They had talented people work for them. Great chefs as well. They would do this thing called the chef brewer battle, where the brewers within there and the sister company that they owned at the time, the brewers would team up with the chefs of the Portsmouth Brewery, and almost like what's this show, the Iron Chef. You have to use Cascade hops and cheeks of a pig. What are you gonna do? And the chef would say, okay, I can do this and make the meal, and you come up with the beer, and they would do a beer and food pairing. And I got the opportunity to be able to sit and judge at a couple of these, which was amazing. At one time, it was me, another beer writer, and the owner of a restaurant called the Black Trumpet. And if you haven't been to the Black Trumpet, you need to go there. They're in Portsmouth, and the place is amazing. But we just had such a good time, and it was never pretentious. And those beer dinners, you could go to a beer dinner right now, and it'll cost you $150. You might get 5 courses and 5 samples. I never left hungry. I always had enough food. I had enough beer. I made sure I had a ride after, because we sometimes get you'd get your smaller glasses and then you get your full pour. And dessert might be, you guessed it, an Imperial Stout. Because Imperial Stout is such a great beer to go with food. It is a food. It is a food. Beer is food. I will say that now. I will say that many times. If you're tuning in for other episodes, you'll probably hear me say it again. It's something that I learned from Garrett Oliver, brewmaster at Brooklyn Brewery. And he said, beer is food. Pow! Blew my mind when he said that. And I was like, wow. Instead of trying to pair the beer with the food, just treat it like food and put it together. So a wonderful Imperial Stout mixed with a rich, dark chocolate cake with some strawberries in it or something to that effect. Wonderful. So, in their giving and their willingness to do other things, one of the things they did, and this is how this ties into my cycling piece of things, I raise money for multiple sclerosis through Bike MS. Because I'm a brewer and because I was a beer writer, I would reach out to other breweries. I'm like, hey, I need a way to be able to generate some donations. Can you donate a bike jersey? And these other breweries from all over the country, I wasn't afraid to ask anybody. I didn't care. And they would donate bike jerseys to me, and I would raffle them off. Or say, hey, to the highest bidder or whatever. So if this cycling jersey is going to cost you $100, we'll get bids, and maybe I'll get up to 70. You get a great jersey at a discount. I raise $70 for a charity. Everybody's happy. So one time I had a bunch of these, and I was talking to the Portsmouth Brewery about it, and it was, come on downstairs. And they had this downstairs area called the Laponza Lounge. We'll provide food, and you just promote it. I'm like, oh, that's great. So they gave me all the food, so like nachos and chips and whatever else. And people could buy beers and hang out and come down and do bids on jerseys. And I raised a lot of money for Bike MS that year. It was great. And gave away a bunch of jerseys. I wish I had kept the Portsmouth Brewery jersey for myself. I'm not going to lie. I had a couple of those. They donated jerseys too. They donated a couple of jerseys as well as the room and all that food. I wish I had one of those jerseys, but whoever's wearing those jerseys right now, I'm sure they're very, very happy with them. But now that they are no more, man, I wish I had a P-Brew jersey. But, well, maybe I'll come across one at some point and that fits my larger size as well. Us beer drinkers in our cycling gear, we're kind of like making a sausage sometimes. You stuff everything in there, but that's fine. So, yeah, they were giving. The Portsmouth Brewery was a giving place. I also had an idea one time. It was the Tour de France. And I had this idea, and I try to do this each year, where I ride every day of the tour. I'm not riding as far as they ride on the tour. Let's get that straight. But I would try to ride every day of the tour and drink a different beer every day. So on the weekends, I'm like, well, I have plenty of time, and I don't have to go to work. Let's do a ride in the morning and end at Portsmouth Brewery. And they would have the race on at the downstairs television, so we'd catch the end of the stage. Or if some other people would show up, I think they opened a little early and would catch the end of the stage, and then they would go for their long Saturday or Sunday bike ride. it was just so inclusive. The beer, the food, the people, all of it. So I don't know what else I want to be able to say. Um, I have so many thoughts that I want to be able to put together. Some of them make sense, some of them don't. No one wants to listen to me ramble. But podcasting is about telling stories, and stories are better when they're about interesting people. The Portsmouth Brewery, I met so many interesting people. It was run by interesting people. Um, yeah, the amount of brewers that have come through there, the brewers that I would sit and have dinners with, my dear friend Paul Davis, who has since passed away. I remember having dinner with him, and we would just talk not only just beer but life stuff, and have the Reuben sandwich, which is also another piece of deliciousness that is not going to return. Someone has to find a way to be able to make that pea brew Reuben sandwich. We would have gatherings at a time. I think it was the 25th anniversary. They had so many brewers, like all from all over New England, there to help out. 25 different malts, 25 different hops, I think was how that was put together, with 25 brewers in a little tiny space as well. So if you've never been to the Portsmouth Brewery, try to find it online, try to find some videos. I wish I had pictures or something to that effect, but you'll see that it was just a tiny place, but it was just unique in how it was put together. So I think it's fitting that where he was the first president of the NHBA, he came to the NHBA meeting, and that's where he made the announcement of I'm letting it go. It's time. It's time to move on. So if you're watching on video, I am looking through my notes. If you're just listening, I apologize for the pause, but just pretend that I'm drinking a beer. So, and I may try to edit some of that if I realize that it really sounds like garbage. But I'm looking here, and I feel like that's everything. That's everything that I wanted to be able to mention about the Portsmouth Brewery. These beers, let's go back to the beer real quick. Imperial Stout at 9.6% is the type of beer that is great for sharing with friends on a cool day. But occasionally, you've got to pop one for yourself. Just make sure you don't have any other plans, and you're going through this 9.6% Imperial Stout. It's in a 16.9% or 16.9 fluid ounce bottle, so 17 ounces, so more than a pint. And you don't want to drink a pint of Imperial Stout. You're getting a little crazy. So I guess I will just end with this. Thank you for joining me on episode 1. We'll talk more bikes the next time. It is springtime. The following episodes, we'll talk about things of the past, like the Cobbled Classics, which happened in the spring, and I will talk about spring beers. I'm going to talk a lot about gravel because I have fallen in love with gravel, and I will talk about Bike MS going on forward into the summer. I also, as I had mentioned, 1991 is when the Portsmouth Brewery opened, and Greg Ouellette is the person who let me know, because I did miss that meeting. I wasn't at the meeting. And Greg Ouellette is at Martha's Exchange, Nashua, New Hampshire, founded in 1993. And so now they are the oldest continuing operating brewery in the state of New Hampshire. So we will do a bike ride, and I will talk about that ride, and I will talk about the beers at Martha's, maybe even have a chat with Greg. And that is going to be not the next 6 episodes in a row, but look forward to those 6 episodes where we'll talk at the oldest brewery in each state of New England and look for a great ride. If you have an idea for a great ride near one of these oldest breweries, shoot that to me. We'll have an email address, If you're watching on video, I will put like a link below and you can put that in there. The oldest breweries in all of New England, Connecticut, off the top of my head, is the Willimantic Pub and Brewery. In Rhode Island, I believe that is Trinity Brewhouse. In Massachusetts, I believe that is Harpoon. Although Harpoon and Sam Adams are like right there, and I think it might be like who had the license first. Vermont is definitely the Vermont Pub and Brewery in Burlington. And Maine, see, I should have wrote this down. But like I said, today's just raw. I'm going to go with Geary's. I think it is D.L. Geary's is the oldest brewery established in Maine. And we'll do a ride, and we'll talk, and hang out. But until then, I had a saying that I use with my previous handle, so to speak, with Instagram, and I will bring some of that onto here. But more importantly, I want to say thank you. Thank you to the Portsmouth Brewery. Thank you for what you have given me. Honestly, I learned a lot. I learned how to just chat, sit at a bar. It didn't always have to be about the beer. It would be about having the beer in hand and talking about how are you? How's your family? How's your wife? The business opportunities that they spurned have benefited me and many another brewer. The memories, again, I could go on and on. I wrote down some because I didn't want to ramble. But thank you. I love you guys. If you can't tell by my voice, I'm actually starting to tear up a little bit. But the Portsmouth Brewery, I owe a lot to the people, all of the people from P Brew, for things I've learned in my brewing career throughout the years. So as a professional brewer, an amateur bike rider, and a lover of just good people, thank you, P Brew. I say cheers, I say Prost, and for everyone else, as always, be good to yourselves, be good to each other. Ride bikes, drink beer, do epic shit. I'm Uncle Frank, and I will be talking to you the next time here on Hop on Two Wheels. Cheers.